The innkeeper's wife threw the last of Alara Voswin's belongings into the mud. A single traveling case, a wool cloak, a bundle of letters tied with ribbon that had never been answered. Please. Alara's voice cracked. Just one more week. He's coming. He promised he would come. You've been saying that for 6 weeks. The woman crossed her thick arms over her chest, blocking the doorway of the Crescent Moon Inn. 6 weeks of unpaid lodging, 6 weeks of meals, 6 weeks of my best room sitting empty of paying guests because some fool girl believed a man would keep his word. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. The kind of autumn rain that seeped through wool and settled into bones. I have nowhere to go? Should have thought of that before you let yourself be abandoned. The door slammed shut. The bolt scraped home. Alara stood in the courtyard, rain streaming down her face, and tried to remember how she had arrived at this moment. 6 weeks ago, she had been Alara Voswin of Millbrook House, the niece of Sir Osric Voswin. Not wealthy, but respectable. Not beautiful, but presentable. Not loved, but useful. Useful enough to sell. Lord Hadrian Mercer has offered a generous settlement, her uncle had announced over breakfast, not bothering to look up from his newspaper. The marriage will take place in 3 weeks. You'll travel ahead to meet him at his northern estate. I've never heard of Lord Hadrian Mercer. You don't need to hear of him. You need to marry him. Osric had finally raised his eyes, and Alara saw nothing in them but calculation. He's wealthy, titled, and willing to overlook your lack of dowry in exchange for other considerations. What considerations? None of your concern. She should have questioned more. She should have demanded answers. But Alara had spent 22 years learning that questions earned nothing but cold silence and colder treatment. Her parents had died when she was 7, leaving her to an uncle who saw her as a burden to be managed, then a commodity to be traded. So she had packed her single case. She had written letters to an address she'd been given, introducing herself to her future husband. She had traveled 3 days north to the Crescent Moon Inn, where Lord Hadrian Mercer was supposed to meet her. He never came. The first week, she told herself he was delayed. The second week, she told herself there must be an emergency. The third week, she wrote to her uncle. No response. The fourth week, she wrote again. Silence. The fifth week, her money ran out. The sixth week, she understood. No one was coming. No one had ever intended to come. She had been sold to a man who didn't exist. Or worse, to a man who had taken whatever settlement her uncle had negotiated and simply walked away. Now Alara knelt in the mud, gathering her scattered belongings with numb fingers. The letters she had written, the ones that had never been answered, were already soaked through. The ink was bleeding, words dissolving into nothing. Just like her. There's a workhouse in Aldbury, the innkeeper's wife called through the window, 5 miles east. They take women like you. Women like you. Discarded women, worthless women. Women foolish enough to believe promises made by men. Alara clutched her case to her chest and walked. She didn't know where she was going. The road stretched in both directions, empty and gray. The rain fell harder. Her boots, already worn thin, offered no protection against the cold water pooling in the ruts. 1 mile passed, then 2. Her legs began to shake. The chill had moved past her skin, past her muscles, into something deeper. She thought of the workhouse. She thought of what happened to women there, the labor, the degradation, the slow erasure of everything that made a person human. She thought of just stopping, sitting down beside the road and letting the rain take her. Would anyone notice? Would anyone care? The sound of hooves broke through the downpour. Alara turned, squinting through the rain. A black carriage was approaching, moving fast, pulled by 4 matched horses the color of midnight. It was the kind of carriage that belonged to someone powerful, someone who would never stop for a woman standing alone in the mud. But the carriage slowed. then stopped. The door opened and a man looked out. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, with dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and pale gray eyes that seemed to cut right through her. His clothes were impeccable. His expression was unreadable. "You're the woman from the inn," he said. It was not a question. Alara's heart lurched. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been looking for you." The stranger stepped down from the carriage, heedless of the rain soaking his expensive coat. "Get inside," he said. Ilara didn't move. "Who are you?" "Someone who can help you, or someone who can leave you here to die in the mud. Choose quickly. I'm not a patient man." Every instinct told her to refuse. She had trusted once already, trusted her uncle, and trusted the promise of a husband, and look where that had led her. But the alternative was the workhouse, or the road, or death. She climbed into the carriage. The interior was warm, lined with velvet the color of dark wine. A brazier glowed in the corner, filling the space with heat that made Alara's frozen fingers ache as feeling returned. She huddled on the seat, dripping rain onto cushions that probably cost more than everything she had ever owned. The man settled across from her, pulling the door shut. He rapped twice on the roof, and the carriage lurched forward. "My name is Lysander Ashcroft," he said, "Duke of Thornwood." A duke. She was sitting across from a duke, soaked and shivering and covered in mud. "Your Grace." The title came out rough, her throat raw from the cold. "Forgive my appearance, I don't care about your appearance." He cut her off, his gaze never leaving her face. "I care about how you came to be standing alone on a road in the middle of a rainstorm waiting for a husband who will never arrive." The words hit her like a slap. "You know about Lord Hadrian Mercer?" "I know everything about Lord Hadrian Mercer." A shadow crossed his features, including the fact that he's not a lord, he's not wealthy, and the estate he promised you doesn't exist. The carriage seemed to tilt. "That's not possible. My uncle arranged everything. There were documents, contracts." "Forged. Mercer is a confidence man who specializes in desperate families with unmarried women. Your uncle paid him a settlement to take you off his hands. Mercer kept the money and vanished, leaving you stranded with no resources and no recourse." Alara pressed a hand to her stomach, fighting the urge to be sick. "This has happened before?" "At least 6 times that I know of. Possibly more." "Why do you know this? Why were you looking for me?" Lysander was quiet for a long moment. The rain drummed against the carriage roof. Outside, the world blurred past in shades of gray. "Because one of his victims was my cousin," he said finally. "She was 17 years old. Her family was impoverished but proud. When Mercer offered marriage, they thought she'd been saved." His jaw tightened. 6 months after he abandoned her, she walked into the river behind her family's house and didn't walk out. Alara closed her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be useful." The coldness in his voice made her flinch. "I've spent 2 years tracking Mercer's victims, building a case, gathering evidence. But I've never found one before she disappeared, before she was destroyed. Until you. What do you want from me?" The Duke leaned forward, his presence filling the carriage like smoke. "I want to find Hadrian Mercer. I want to expose every crime he's committed. I want to destroy him so completely that his name becomes a warning whispered to every fortune hunter in England." He paused. "And you're going to help me do it. How?" "You'll stay in my house until your husband comes." The words were bitter, mocking. "That's what I told the innkeeper when I inquired about you. She was quite eager to share your story once I showed her gold." He sat back. "Of course, we both know he's never coming. But the world doesn't know that yet, and that pretense is going to be our weapon." Alara's mind raced, trying to keep pace with what he was saying. "You want me to pretend I'm still waiting for him? For now. Until we understand where he is. Until we can draw him out." The Duke's smile was cold and precise. Mercer is arrogant. When he learns that one of his victims found shelter with the Duke of Thornwood, he'll be curious, worried. He'll make mistakes. And when he does, I'll be waiting. And what happens to me when this is over? That depends on how useful you prove to be. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a reassurance. But it was more than anyone else had offered her. Where are you taking me? Thornwood Hall, my estate. You'll have rooms, food, and protection. His eyes held hers. You'll be safe there. I give you my word. Safe. Ilara had stopped believing in that word weeks ago. But what choice did she have? Thornwood Hall emerged from the mist like something out of a fever dream. It sat atop a hill overlooking a valley shrouded in autumn fog, a sprawling manor of dark stone and climbing ivy. Towers rose at each corner, their windows glinting in the fading light. The grounds stretched endlessly, wild gardens giving way to dense forests that seemed to press against the estate like something hungry. It's isolated, Ilara observed. That's the point. Lysander handed her down from the carriage. No one arrives at Thornwood without my knowledge. No one leaves without my permission. If Mercer tries to reach you here, I'll know. A threat and a comfort wrapped into one. The staff assembled in the entrance hall, faces curious but carefully blank. At their head stood a woman with silver hair pinned severely back and posture straight as a blade. Mrs. Holloway, the housekeeper. She surveyed Ilara with eyes that missed nothing. This is Miss Ilara Voswin, Lysander announced. She'll be staying indefinitely. She's to be treated as an honored guest. Her needs are to be met without question. Is that clear? Perfectly, Your Grace. Mrs. Holloway's voice gave away nothing. Welcome to Thornwood, Miss Voswin. I'll show you to your rooms. The rooms were in the east wing, far from the Duke's quarters. A sitting room with a fireplace. A bedroom with a four-poster bed draped in deep green velvet. A dressing room with empty wardrobes waiting to be filled. You'll find fresh clothes in the armoire, Mrs. Holloway said. The previous guest left them behind. I'll have a bath drawn. Dinner is at 8. His Grace will expect you. After she left, Ilara moved to the window. Below, the fog had swallowed the valley. She could see nothing beyond the immediate grounds. No roads, no other houses, no sign of the world she had left behind. She was completely alone, completely dependent, completely at the mercy of a man she had met 2 hours ago. But she was alive, and she was angry. That anger carried her through the bath, through dressing in a borrowed gown of dark blue silk, through descending the grand staircase to the dining room. It carried her to the table where Lysander waited, already seated, watching her approach with that unreadable gaze. You clean up well, he observed. You're not very good at compliments. I'm not trying to be. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit, eat, then we'll talk. The meal was simple but excellent. Roast pheasant, vegetables, fresh bread, wine that probably cost more than a month's rent at the Crescent Moon. Ilara ate mechanically, barely tasting anything, her mind churning through everything she had learned. Finally, Lysander set down his fork. Ask your questions. How do you know Mercer won't simply disappear? If he learns I'm here, why wouldn't he just move on to his next victim? Because I won't let him. Lysander's voice was cold and certain. I have people watching his known associates. The moment he surfaces, I'll know. And more importantly, I have something he wants. What? You. Ilara's blood chilled. You're using me as bait. I'm using you as a lure. There's a difference. He leaned forward. Mercer is careful. He's avoided justice for years because he never leaves witnesses who can identify him. The women he discards are too ashamed to speak, too broken to fight. But you're not broken, Miss Voswin. I saw it in the road when you refused to collapse. I see it now in the way you're looking at me like you want to throw your wine in my face. She did want to. Very much. What makes you think I won't simply walk out of here? Take my chances on my own? You're welcome to try, but consider, you have no money, no family willing to help you, and no reputation left to protect. The world has decided you're a ruined woman, abandoned by a husband who never existed. You can spend the rest of your life trying to outrun that shadow. He paused. Or you can help me destroy the man who ruined you. Your choice. Alara stared at him. This cold, calculating duke who had pulled her from the mud and offered her shelter wrapped in strategy. If I do this, she said slowly, I want more than just safety. I want my name cleared. I want the world to know I was a victim, not a fool. That can be arranged. And I want to be part of it. Not just bait. Not just a lure sitting in your pretty cage waiting for the trap to spring. I want to help bring him down. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Surprise? Respect? Both? You're negotiating terms while wearing borrowed clothes in a house where you're entirely dependent on my goodwill. His voice was soft. Most women in your position would simply be grateful. Gratitude hasn't served me well, neither has trust. I'd rather have a partnership. The silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Then Lysander smiled. It was small, cold, but real. Very well, Miss Voswin. A partnership. He extended his hand across the table. You help me find Hadrian Mercer. You help me gather evidence that will see him hanged or transported. In return, I'll clear your name, establish you with a respectable position, and ensure you never have to depend on the mercy of men like your uncle again. Alara looked at his hand. Strong, scarred across the knuckles, belonging to a man who had just offered to make her a weapon in his war for justice. She had been sold by her uncle, abandoned by a phantom husband, cast out into the rain to die. Now she was being offered a chance to fight back. She took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip was firm, warm, and certain. Welcome to Thornwood, Miss Voswin. Rest well tonight. Tomorrow, your education begins. He released her hand and stood, walking toward the door. Your Grace, she called after him. He paused, looking back. What happens if Mercer doesn't take the bait? What happens if he never comes? Lysander's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable beneath the controlled surface. Then I'll find another way. I've been hunting him for 2 years. I won't stop until he pays for what he did. To my cousin. To you. To every woman he's destroyed. He opened the door. Get some sleep. You're going to need it. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone with the fire and the weight of the choice she had just made. She walked to the window, staring out at the darkness beyond the glass. 6 weeks ago, she had been a naive girl who believed promises and trusted family. Now she was something else. A survivor. A witness. A weapon. She didn't know if she could trust Lysander Ashcroft. She didn't know if his plans would work. She didn't know if Hadrian Mercer would ever face justice. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was done being a victim. Alara woke to silence. Not the comfortable silence of rest, but the heavy silence of isolation. No street noise. No voices from neighboring rooms. No reminder that the world beyond these walls existed at all. She dressed in another borrowed gown, this one the color of autumn leaves, and found her way downstairs. The manor seemed even larger in daylight, corridors branching in every direction, portraits of stern-faced ancestors watching her pass with painted disapproval. Mrs. Holloway intercepted her at the base of the main staircase. His Grace is in the West Wing. He's asked not to be disturbed before noon. The housekeeper's tone was polite but firm. Breakfast has been laid in the morning room. I'll show you. Does he always keep such late hours? His Grace keeps whatever hours his work requires. And what work is that? Mrs. Holloway paused, her expression unreadable. I think that's a question for His Grace, Miss Voswin. The morning room was small and bright, windows overlooking a garden gone wild with neglect. Ilara ate alone, listening to the tick of the mantel clock and the distant sound of servants moving through the house. After breakfast, she explored. The library first. 2 stories of books, floor to ceiling, with a rolling ladder and deep leather chairs positioned near the fireplace. She ran her fingers along the spines, finding volumes on law, history, philosophy, and, curiously, a shelf dedicated entirely to criminal proceedings. The music room next, where a pianoforte sat beneath a dust cover, untouched for years. Then a conservatory filled with dead plants. Then a gallery of paintings, most depicting hunts or battles, violence made beautiful through oil and canvas. Finally, she found a door that wouldn't open. Locked. In a house where she was supposedly an honored guest. That room is private. Ilara spun. Lysander stood at the end of the corridor, dressed in black, his face shadowed by the dim light. You said I had the run of the house. I said you'd be treated as a guest. Guests don't enter private studies. He walked toward her, each step deliberate. That room contains 2 years of investigation into Hadrian Mercer. Documents, testimonies, financial records, everything I've gathered. Then why can't I see it? Because you haven't earned that trust yet. The words stung more than they should have. I agreed to help you, Ilara said quietly. I shook your hand. I gave you my word. Words are easy. Actions take longer. Lysander stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint circles beneath his eyes. Prove yourself, Miss Voswin. Then we'll talk about what's behind locked doors. He walked past her without another word, disappearing around the corner. Ilara stared at the locked door for a long moment. Then she went to find Mrs. Holloway. Tell me about his cousin. Mrs. Holloway's hands stilled over the linen she was folding. They were in the upstairs sitting room, where Ilara had been summoned to discuss household matters, which seemed to mean learning Thornwood's rhythms and rules. Miss Cecily. The housekeeper's voice softened. She was bright, curious, too trusting for her own good. What happened to her? The Duke mentioned she walked into a river, but he didn't explain why. Because it's not my story to tell. Mrs. Holloway resumed folding. But I'll say this. Cecily believed in goodness. She believed people were kind at heart. When that man convinced her family he wanted to marry her, she was overjoyed. When he vanished with their money and left her stranded in a strange town with nothing but shame and whispers. She shook her head. Some hearts can't survive that kind of breaking. And the Duke blames himself? His Grace blames himself for everything. It's his way. Mrs. Holloway looked at Ilara directly. He searched for her, you know, the moment he learned she'd been abandoned. But by the time he found where she'd gone, she was already in the ground. Ilara thought of Lysander's cold demeanor, his controlled voice, the way he moved through this enormous house like a man haunted by ghosts. He won't let that happen again, she said softly. No, he won't. Mrs. Holloway set down the last linen. Which is why he brought you here. You're his second chance, Miss Voswin. Don't waste it. That afternoon, Lysander summoned her to the locked study. The room was smaller than she expected, every surface covered with papers, maps, and documents. A large board dominated one wall, covered with names and dates and lines of red string connecting them like a spider's web. 6 women that I know of, Lysander said, gesturing to the board. Possibly more. Mercer changes his name, his appearance, his story. But his method is always the same. Find a desperate family, offer marriage, take whatever money they have, disappear. Ilara studied the names. Charlotte Pemberton, Anne Whitfield, Mary Calloway, Helena Storebridge, Dorothea Wynne, Cecily Ashcroft. And now, at the bottom, freshly written, Ilara Voswin. What happened to the others? Charlotte entered a workhouse. She died of fever within the year. Anne's family disowned her. Last I heard, she was working in a factory in Manchester. Mary managed to return home, but she's considered ruined. No prospects, no future. Helena disappeared entirely. Dorothea took her own life, like Cecily. His voice hardened. And Cecily, you already know. They all just accepted it? None of them fought back? How do you fight a ghost? Lysander turned to face her. Mercer leaves no trail. He uses false names, false documents. By the time his victims realize they've been deceived, he's already moved on to the next mark. The shame keeps them silent. The isolation keeps them weak. But I'm not silent, and I'm not weak. No, you're not. The mask he wore cracked, just slightly. Which is why I'm going to teach you everything I know about him. His patterns, his associates, his weaknesses. He pulled a chair to the desk. Sit. We have work to do. For the next 3 hours, Ilara learned. She learned that Mercer preferred women between 18 and 25. She learned that he targeted families with minor titles but major debts. She learned that he had a network of accomplices, forgers who created fake documents, innkeepers who provided alibis, even a corrupt solicitor who made the arrangements look legitimate. She learned that her uncle had likely been approached months before the proposal, groomed and manipulated until selling his niece seemed like the only sensible option. He'll have moved on by now, Lysander said, as the light outside began to fade. He never stays in one place after a job, but his network remains. If we can find one thread, we can unravel the whole tapestry. What thread do we have? Lysander pulled a letter from beneath a stack of papers. This arrived yesterday, from a contact in London. He handed it to her. Mercer has been seen in the city. He's using a new name, Lord Aldrich Vane. Ilara's heart stuttered. He's not hiding? He's hunting, looking for his next victim. Lysander's gaze hardened to steel. Which means we have a narrow window to find him before he destroys another woman's life. What do? We go to London. He took the letter back. There's a ball in 3 weeks. Lady Whitmore's autumn celebration. Everyone who matters will be there, including, if my sources are correct, Lord Aldrich Vane. You want me to attend a ball? I don't even know how to. You'll learn. Lysander stood. Starting tomorrow, you'll have tutors. Dancing, etiquette, conversation. Everything you need to move through society without raising suspicion. And then what? I just walk up to the man who ruined my life and introduce myself? No. Lysander's smile was cold and sharp. You let him come to you. And when he does, we'll finally have him exactly where we want him. The tutors arrived the next morning, a dancing master from London, an etiquette instructor who had trained duchesses, a dressmaker with 3 assistants and enough fabric to clothe an army. Ilara had never worked so hard in her life. Chin up, shoulders back. A lady glides. She does not stomp. The fish fork is smaller. Always smaller. If you use the wrong one, you might as well announce you were raised in a barn. This color brings out your eyes. This one makes you look consumptive. We'll burn it immediately. By the end of the first week, Ilara could waltz without stepping on her own feet. By the end of the second, she could navigate a formal dinner without committing social suicide. By the end of the third, she could make polite conversation about absolutely nothing for hours at a time. But the hardest lessons came from Lysander himself. Every evening after the tutors departed, they would meet in his study. He would test her, playing the role of various society figures: the nosy dowager, the flirtatious rake, the suspicious hostess. Lord Aldrich Vane approaches you at the refreshment table, he said one night, circling her like a predator. He compliments your gown. What do you do? Thank him politely. Ask if he's enjoying the evening. He asks where you're from. How do you answer? I tell him I'm a guest of the Duke of Thornwood. I recently arrived from the country. He presses for details. Your family, your circumstances. I deflect. Ask about his own history. Men like him prefer talking about themselves. Lysander stopped circling. Good. And if he asks you to dance? I accept. It gives us time to talk, and it lets me assess him up close. And if he tries to arrange a private meeting? A walk in the garden? Perhaps? Alara met his eyes. I decline gracefully. I tell him I'm not that kind of woman. You might have to be. His voice was flat. If we need information badly enough, then we'll find another way to get it. Alara lifted her chin. I agreed to help you catch him. I didn't agree to let him touch me. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Approval? Relief? Fair enough. He turned away, straightening papers on his desk. You're ready for a test. A real one. What kind of test? Lord and Lady Pembury are arriving tomorrow. They're old friends of my family. They think you're a distant relation I've taken under my protection. He glanced back at her. They're also inveterate gossips. If you can convince them you're a respectable young woman with nothing to hide, you can convince anyone. Alara's stomach tightened. And if I fail? You won't. His voice softened, just slightly. You've worked too hard to fail now. Lord and Lady Pembury arrived at noon the following day. They were exactly as Alara had imagined. Older, wealthy, dressed in the finest fashions, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and sharper tongues that spared no one. So this is the mysterious house guest, Lady Pembury said, examining Alara like a horse at auction. Thornwood has been very secretive about you, my dear. People are beginning to talk. Let them talk. Alara smiled graciously. I find that gossip says more about those who spread it than those it concerns. Lord Pembury chuckled. She has spirit, Thornwood. Wherever did you find her? She found me, actually. Lysander's tone was casual, but Alara saw the tension in his shoulders. Her family and mine have connections going back generations. When she found herself in need of assistance, naturally I offered what I could. Naturally. Lady Pembury's eyes narrowed. And what sort of assistance does a young woman require from an unmarried duke? The question was a trap. Alara could feel it. The kind that comes with no expectations and no conditions, she said calmly. His Grace has been nothing but honorable. I'm grateful for his protection during a difficult time. Difficult how? A family matter. I'd rather not discuss it. Alara let her voice tremble, just slightly. Suffice to say, I learned that not everyone who promises to care for you can be trusted. Lady Pembury's expression shifted. The suspicion gave way to something softer. Men can be terrible creatures, she said quietly, even the ones who seem respectable. Especially those. Alara met the older woman's eyes, which is why I'm so fortunate to have found genuine kindness in His Grace. The rest of the visit passed smoothly. Alara navigated conversation, deflected intrusive questions, and performed the role of respectable young woman with a mysterious past. By the time the Pemburys departed, Lady Pembury had kissed her cheek and promised to introduce her to the right people in London. After their carriage disappeared down the drive, Lysander found Alara in the drawing room. You did well, he said. Lady Pembury believed me? Lady Pembury adores you. By tomorrow, she'll have told half of London about the charming young woman staying at Thornwood Hall. He paused. Which means Mercer will hear about you soon, if he hasn't already. The weight of that settled over Alara like a shroud. Good. She stood, smoothing her skirts. Let him hear. Let him wonder. You're not afraid? I'm terrified. She looked at Lysander directly. But I've learned that fear and courage can exist in the same breath. You taught me that. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second. Get some rest, he said quietly. We leave for London in 3 days. But before we go, there's something we need to discuss. What? Lysander hesitated, which was unlike him. Your protection in London will require more than my word. Society has rules about unmarried women living under the roof of unmarried men. If we're to move freely, if we're to make Mercer believe you're untouchable. He met her eyes. We should marry. A legal arrangement. Nothing more. Alara's breath caught. You want to marry me? I want to protect you. Marriage is the most effective way to do that. His voice was matter of fact, but she saw something else beneath the surface. As my wife, you become the Duchess of Thornwood. No one can question your presence. No one can touch you without going through me. And what do you get? A partner. A witness who can testify against Mercer without being dismissed as a ruined woman seeking attention. He stepped closer. This changes nothing between us. Separate rooms, separate lives, a strategic alliance, nothing more. Alara thought of the women on his board, the ones who had been destroyed because they had no protection, no status, no one to stand beside them. Very well, she said quietly. I'll marry you. The ceremony will be tomorrow. Small, private, just the vicar and 2 witnesses. Lysander extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? She took it. We have an agreement. London swallowed them whole. The city was chaos made manifest, carriages jostling for position on crowded streets, vendors shouting their wares, soot-stained buildings rising like crooked teeth against a gray sky. After weeks in the isolation of Thornwood Hall, the noise was almost unbearable. Lysander's townhouse on Belgrave Square was smaller than the country estate, but no less imposing. 4 stories of white stone, with black iron railings and windows that reflected the pale autumn light like blind eyes. You'll stay in the guest quarters on the 3rd floor, Lysander said, as servants unloaded their trunks. The ball is in 2 days. Until then, we prepare. Prepare how? I have informants throughout the city. Tonight, I'll meet with them, confirm Mercer's movements, and identify his current targets. His jaw tightened. You'll stay here. Rest. Review everything we've discussed. You're leaving me alone? You'll have the staff. And this. He pressed something cold into her palm. A small pistol. Silver-plated, elegant, deadly. Do you know how to use it? Point and pull the trigger? Close enough. His eyes held hers. Don't hesitate if you need to. Mercer has people everywhere. If anyone approaches you that you don't recognize, anyone at all, you defend yourself first and ask questions later. Ilara wrapped her fingers around the weapon. It was heavier than she expected. You think he already knows I'm here? I think he knows everything that happens in this city. Lysander pulled on his gloves. Which is why we need to move faster than he expects. He was gone before she could respond, leaving Alara alone in the foyer with a pistol in her hand and fear coiling in her stomach. The next 2 days passed in a blur of final preparations. The dressmaker arrived with the gown Alara would wear to Lady Whitmore's ball. Deep emerald silk that caught the light like water, with a neckline that was daring without being scandalous. When she tried it on, she barely recognized herself. You look like someone who belongs, Lysander said when he saw her. I feel like someone pretending. That's all any of us do. He circled her slowly, assessing. The emeralds at your throat are on loan from my family's collection. They'll mark you as someone under my protection. Anyone who matters will understand. And Mercer? We'll see a woman he thought he destroyed, standing in the most exclusive ballroom in London, wearing a fortune around her neck. Lysander's smile was cold. It will drive him mad with curiosity. Good. Alara touched the stones at her throat. Let him be curious. let him wonder how the woman he threw away became this. Lady Whitmore's ball was everything Alara had imagined and nothing she was prepared for. The ballroom blazed with candlelight, hundreds of flames reflected in mirrors and crystal, until the entire space seemed to glow. Silk rustled, jewels glittered. The cream of London society moved through the room like players on an elaborate stage. And somewhere among them was the man who had ruined her life. Lysander kept her close as they made their entrance, his hand warm at the small of her back. Whispers followed them like smoke. "Is that Thornwood? Who is that woman? I heard she's his wife. I heard she's a foreign princess." "Ignore them," Lysander murmured. "They'll say anything to fill the silence." But Alara wasn't listening to the whispers. She was scanning the crowd, searching for a face she had never seen but would somehow recognize. Then she found him. Across the ballroom, standing near the orchestra, was a man who matched every description she had memorized. Tall, fair-haired, handsome in a way that seemed almost theatrical. He was laughing at something his companion said, his smile bright and easy and completely false. Lord Aldrich Vane, Hadrian Mercer, the phantom husband who had never existed. "I see him," she breathed. Lysander's hand tightened at her back. "Remember the plan. Let him come to you. And if he doesn't, he will." Lysander's voice cut like a blade. "A man like him can't resist a mystery. And right now, you're the most mysterious woman in the room." Alara danced 3 times before Mercer approached. Once with Lysander, a formal waltz that drew every eye in the room. Once with Lord Pemberton, an elderly earl who talked endlessly about his hunting dogs. Once with a young viscount whose name she immediately forgot. She was standing near the refreshment table, catching her breath, when a voice spoke behind her. "Forgive me, but have we met?" Alara turned slowly, schooling her features into polite curiosity. Hadrian Mercer was even more handsome up close. Blue eyes, perfect teeth. The kind of face that made women trust and men underestimate. "I don't believe so," she said smoothly. "I'm certain I would remember." "And yet you seem so familiar." He tilted his head, studying her. "I'm Lord Aldrich Vane, and you are?" "Alara Ashcroft, Duchess of Thornwood." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Alarm? Both were gone before she could be certain. "Thornwood. How interesting." His smile never wavered. "The Duke is famously selective about his companions. You must be quite remarkable." "I prefer to think I'm simply fortunate." "Fortune favors the bold, they say." He stepped closer. "Tell me, Your Grace, what brings you to London? The season doesn't properly begin for months." "Personal matters. I'd rather not bore you with the details." "I'm never bored by beautiful women." His voice dropped, intimate. "Dance with me. I promise to be a perfect gentleman." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run, to put as much distance between herself and this monster as possible. Instead, she smiled. "One dance, but I warn you, I'm still learning." "Then I'll be gentle." He led her to the floor. The orchestra began a slower waltz. His hand found her waist, and it took everything Alara had not to recoil. "You're trembling," he observed. "The room is warm." "Is it?" His eyes searched her face. "Or is there something you're not telling me, Your Grace?" "We've only just met. There's quite a lot I'm not telling you." He laughed, delighted. "I knew you were interesting. Thornwood always did have excellent taste." They turned past a cluster of observers. Alara caught a glimpse of Lysander watching from the edge of the room, his expression murderous. "Tell me," Mercer continued, "how did you come to be the Duchess? It's quite the unusual match." "Is it? I understood marriages of convenience were quite common among the aristocracy." "Convenience?" Mercer's grip tightened slightly. "Is that what it is?" I've heard Thornwood has rather obsessive tendencies. Certain fixations he can't let go. What kind of fixations? Ghosts, mostly. People from his past he can't forget. His smile sharpened. I do hope you haven't gotten tangled up in anything unpleasant, Your Grace. The Duke's obsessions have a way of consuming everyone around him. The music ended. Alara stepped back, breaking his hold. Thank you for the dance, Lord Vane. The pleasure was mine. He caught her hand, pressing his lips to her gloved fingers. I do hope we'll meet again. I find myself quite fascinated by you. Perhaps we will. She walked away without looking back, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Lysander intercepted her near the terrace doors. Well? He suspects something. Alara kept her voice low. He mentioned your obsessions, your ghosts. He's testing you, trying to understand how much you know. He touched me. Her voice cracked. His hands were on me and I had to smile and pretend. I know. Lysander's hand found hers, hidden by the folds of her skirt. I know, and I'm sorry. But you did beautifully. He's hooked now. What happens next? Next, we make him desperate. Lysander's eyes blazed with cold fire. Come, there's someone you need to meet. Lysander led her through the crowd to a private anteroom where a woman waited alone. She was young, perhaps 19, with auburn hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her gown was fine but worn, her posture rigid with barely contained terror. Your Grace, this is Miss Catherine Hale. Lysander closed the door. Until 6 months ago, she was engaged to Lord Aldrich Vane. Alara's breath caught. Another victim? My father gave him £400. Catherine's voice was hollow. Everything we had. He promised to take me to his estate in Yorkshire. He promised we'd be married within the month. She laughed bitterly. There is no estate. There was never going to be a marriage. How did you escape? I didn't escape. I was discarded. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. When he learned my father had discovered his fraud and was threatening to go to the magistrates, he vanished. Left me stranded in a coaching inn 50 miles from home with nothing but the clothes on my back. What happened to your father? Catherine's face crumpled. He died. The shame, the financial ruin. His heart gave out 2 months later. Alara crossed the room, taking Catherine's hands in her own. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Help me destroy him. Catherine's eyes blazed. When His Grace found me, I thought he was just another man who wanted to use me, but he's given me something better than charity. He's given me a chance to fight. She's going to testify, Lysander said quietly. When the time comes, she'll stand before society and tell them exactly what Mercer did to her. But her reputation, my reputation is already gone. Catherine stood, her chin lifting. Let them call me ruined. Let them whisper. If it means that monster faces justice, I'll bear any scandal. Alara looked between Catherine and Lysander. How many more are there? Women willing to speak? 3, as of yesterday. I've been gathering them for months. Lysander's voice was grim. But testimony isn't enough. We need proof. Documents, financial records, something that shows the pattern of fraud beyond any doubt. Mercer keeps records. Catherine said. He's meticulous about it. I saw him writing in a ledger once, documenting every payment, every mark, and every scheme. Where does he keep it? I don't know, but I know someone who might. 2 hours later, Alara found herself in a part of London she had never imagined existed. The streets were narrow and dark, lined with crumbling buildings and shadows that moved. Lysander had insisted on accompanying her, his hand never far from the weapon concealed beneath his coat. This is madness, she whispered. This is necessity. He guided her toward a tavern with no sign, just a faded red door. The woman we're meeting is a forger. She created documents for Mercer for years. Catherine knew her name. Why would she help us? Because Mercer stopped paying her 3 months ago, and because I'm offering her enough gold to disappear to the continent. He paused at the door. Stay close. Don't speak unless I tell you to. The tavern's interior was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap ale. Lysander led her to a back room where a woman waited in the shadows. She was older than Alara expected, with gray-streaked hair and clever eyes that darted between them like a bird's. "You're Thornwood," the woman said. "I've heard of you." "And you're Mrs. Pritchard. I've heard of you too." "Then you know I don't work for free." She held out her hand, palm up. Lysander dropped a heavy purse into it. "Half now. Half when you give me what I need." Mrs. Pritchard weighed the purse, then nodded. "What do you want to know?" "Mercer's ledger, the one where he keeps his records. He has a solicitor, Cornelius Black, office on Threadneedle Street." Mrs. Pritchard smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "Mercer doesn't trust anyone, but he trusts Black less than most, so he keeps the ledger there, locked in a safe, where Black can't access it without him present." "How do we get to it?" "You don't. That safe is impenetrable." Mrs. Pritchard leaned forward. "But there's a copy." "Mercer's not stupid. He knows Blackie might betray him someday, so he keeps a duplicate somewhere else. Somewhere personal." "Where?" "His current lodgings. A townhouse on Curzon Street." Mrs. Pritchard's eyes glittered. "He keeps it in his bedchamber, behind a painting of a hunting scene." Lysander straightened. "You're certain?" "I helped him choose the hiding spot. He thought it was clever." She laughed. "It's not." They left the tavern with information that could destroy Hadrian Mercer once and for all. But as they walked back toward the carriage, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Alara's heart stopped. It was Mercer. "Good evening, Your Grace." His smile was razor-sharp. "Or should I call you Miss Voswin? After all, that was your name when we were engaged." Lysander moved between them instantly. "Stay away from her." "Or what? You'll challenge me to a duel?" Mercer laughed. "Please. I know exactly what you're doing, Thornwood. Gathering your little army of ruined women, searching for evidence that doesn't exist." He stepped closer. "But here's what you don't understand. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've destroyed men more powerful than you." "Then why do you look so frightened?" Tension rippled across Mercer's handsome features. "I'm not frightened. I'm amused." "You should be frightened." Alara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her terror. "Because I'm not one of your broken victims who'll stay silent out of shame. I'm going to stand in front of everyone who matters and tell them exactly what you are." "And who would believe you?" "A nobody who was foolish enough to trust a stranger." "They'll believe me." She lifted her chin. "Because I'm not alone anymore." Mercer's smile faded. For the first time, Ilara saw the predator beneath the charm, cold and calculating and dangerous. "You have no idea what you've started," he said softly. "But you will?" He vanished into the darkness as quickly as he had appeared. Lysander grabbed Ilara's arm. "We need to leave. Now." "He knows. He knows everything." "Which means we're out of time." Lysander's gaze burned with intensity. "We get that ledger tonight, before he can destroy it." The townhouse on Curzon Street was dark when they arrived. Lysander had assembled a small team, 2 former soldiers who owed him their lives, a locksmith who asked no questions, and Catherine Hale, who refused to be left behind. "Mercer left for his club an hour ago," one of the soldiers reported. "He won't return until dawn." "Then we have until dawn to find that ledger." Lysander turned to Alara. "You don't have to do this. You can wait in the carriage." "I've come this far. I'm not stopping now." The locksmith made quick work of the servants' entrance. They slipped inside, moving through darkened corridors by candlelight. Mercer's bedchamber was on the 2nd floor. Exactly as Mrs. Pritchard had described, a hunting scene hung above the fireplace. Behind it, a small safe was set into the wall. The locksmith knelt, working his tools with practiced efficiency. "Someone's coming!" one of the soldiers hissed from the doorway. They barely had time to hide before the door swung open. A servant entered, carrying fresh linens. She moved about the room, unaware of the intruders concealed in the shadows. Minutes stretched into eternity before she finally departed. "Clear," the soldier whispered. The locksmith returned to his work. A soft click, and the safe swung open. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, thick with entries. Lysander opened it, scanning the pages. "It's all here," he breathed. "Every victim, every payment, every false identity he's ever used." He looked at Alara. "We have him." 3 days later, Lady Whitmore hosted another gathering, a garden party this time, attended by the same elite crowd who had witnessed Alara's debut. But this time, Alara wasn't there to dance. She was there to destroy. Lysander had arranged everything. The magistrate was present, along with Lord Chief Justice Hartwell, 3 members of Parliament, and a carefully selected audience of the most influential gossips in London. Mercer arrived late, still confident, still smiling. He had no idea what was waiting for him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lysander's voice cut through the conversation. "Thank you for attending today. I have an announcement that concerns everyone here." The crowd fell silent. For the past decade, a man has moved through our society, a man who presents himself as a lord, a gentleman, a suitable match for our daughters and sisters. Lysander's eyes found Mercer in the crowd. "That man is a fraud, a thief, and a destroyer of innocent women." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. "That's quite an accusation," Lord Pemberton said. "Do you have proof?" "I have more than proof." Lysander gestured, and Catherine Hale stepped forward. "I have witnesses." Catherine's voice trembled, but she did not falter. She told her story, every painful detail from the false courtship to the stolen money to her father's death. When she finished, tears streamed down her face, but her eyes were fire. 2 more women followed, then a third. Each one had been deceived by the same man. Each one had been destroyed. Each one had found the courage to speak. By the time they finished, the crowd was in uproar. "This is absurd," Mercer sputtered. "These women are lying. They're being paid to—" "Are they?" Lysander held up the ledger. "Because I have documentation. In your own handwriting. Every victim. Every scheme. Every payment." He opened the ledger, reading aloud. Names, dates, amounts. The systematic destruction of 6 families, laid bare for all to hear. "This proves nothing," Mercer insisted, but his face had gone white. "That ledger was stolen. It's fabricated." "Then perhaps this will convince you." A new voice spoke from the edge of the crowd. Everyone turned. Sir Osric Voswyn, Alara's uncle, stood there with 2 magistrates at his side. He looked older than she remembered, diminished somehow. "I was approached by this man 2 years ago," Osric said, his voice shaking. "He offered to take my niece off my hands in exchange for a settlement. I agreed because I was desperate, because I was a coward." He looked at Alara, and for the first time she saw shame in his eyes. "I knew something was wrong. I knew he was too eager, too smooth. But I didn't care. I just wanted the burden gone." "Uncle, let me finish." Osric pulled papers from his coat. "After I learned what happened to Alara, after I learned she'd been left to die, I started investigating. I found other families he'd approached. I found the solicitor who helped him forge documents." He handed the papers to the magistrate. "It's all there. Everything you need to prosecute him." The magistrate examined the documents, then nodded to his officers. "Lord Aldrich Vane, or whatever your true name is, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and conspiracy." Mercer tried to run. He made it 3 steps before the officers seized him. "You can't do this," he screamed, struggling against their grip. "Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," Ilara said, stepping forward. "You're the man who threw women away like garbage. You're the man who thought shame would keep us silent." She smiled, cold and triumphant. "You were wrong." As they dragged Mercer away, the crowd erupted. Some were outraged. Some were sympathetic. All were talking. But Ilara heard none of it. She was looking at Lysander, who was looking at her with something in his eyes she had never seen before. Pride, relief, and something deeper. Something that made her heart ache. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it." He took her hands in his. "Every step of the way, you chose courage over safety, truth over silence. I just provided the resources. You provided more than that." Ilara squeezed his hands. "You gave me something I'd lost. You gave me hope." That night, Ilara found Lysander in the library of his townhouse. He stood at the window, staring out at the London street below. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the room. "You should be celebrating," she said softly. "I should be." He didn't turn around. "Mercer is in custody. The evidence is overwhelming. He'll hang or be transported, either way. He'll never hurt anyone again." "Then why do you look like a man carrying the weight of the world?" Finally he turned, and Ilara saw something she had never seen before. Tears, because it doesn't bring her back. His voice broke. "Cecily is still gone. All those years of hunting him, all that planning and scheming, and she's still dead." Ilara crossed the room until she stood close enough to touch him. "No, it doesn't bring her back, but it honors her memory. It protects the women who might have been next." She reached up, touching his face. "That matters, Lysander. That matters more than you know. When did you start calling me by my name?" "When I stopped being afraid of you." Something in him seemed to release. The walls he kept around himself cracked, then crumbled. "I wasn't supposed to feel this," he said roughly. "You were supposed to be a means to an end, a witness, a weapon. And what am I now?" He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. "Everything." His voice was raw. "You're everything I didn't know I needed, and I don't know how to exist without you anymore." "Then don't." Ilara's heart was pounding. "Don't exist without me." "Ilara, I'm not a good man. I'm obsessive and cold, and I've spent years caring about nothing but revenge. I don't need a good man." She gripped his coat, pulling him closer. "I need someone who sees me, someone who fights beside me, someone who chose me when everyone else threw me away. I will always choose you." His forehead pressed against hers. "Always." "Then say it." Her voice trembled. "Tell me this is real. I love you." The words came out broken, desperate and true. "I love you, and I'm terrified, and I don't deserve you. But I can't pretend anymore." Ilara kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was years of loneliness and weeks of fear and the overwhelming relief of finally being home. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she felt something inside her heal that she hadn't known was broken. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and shaking, Lysander laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and surprised and utterly human. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I've never loved anyone before. Neither have I." Ilara smiled. "We'll figure it out together." 6 months later, Ilara stood in the garden at Thornwood Hall, watching spring sunlight dance across the newly planted flowers. The manor had changed. Windows that had been shuttered for years stood open. The conservatory bloomed with life. Laughter echoed through corridors that had known only silence. But the greatest change was in the East Wing, where Ilara had established the Thornwood Women's Refuge. 23 women had passed through its doors since it opened. Women who had been abandoned, defrauded, left with nothing. Women who had been told their shame made them worthless. Each one found shelter, training, and a path to a new life. Catherine Hale ran the day-to-day operations, her experience transforming into purpose. 3 of Mercer's other victims had joined the staff, turning their pain into power. "You're staring again." Ilara turned to find Lysander watching her from the terrace, a small smile on his lips. "I'm thinking," she corrected. "Dangerous habit." He walked toward her, taking her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different everything is. 6 months ago, I was standing in the rain with nothing, convinced I would die alone and forgotten." She looked up at the manor, at the life they had built. "Now I have more than I ever dreamed possible." "You have exactly what you deserve." Lysander lifted her hand, pressing his lips to her knuckles. "You fought for it. You earned it. We earned it." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Ilara's breath caught. "I know our wedding was practical, strategic, necessary for your protection," he said quietly. "But this isn't practical or strategic." He opened the box to reveal a ring set with a deep green emerald surrounded by diamonds. "This is a choice. I'm choosing you, Ilara. Not because I need to, because I want to, because I love you more than I knew I was capable of loving anyone." Ilara's vision blurred with tears. "Lysander, you said once that you'd learned not to trust promises made by men." He slid the ring onto her finger, beside the simple gold band she already wore. "I'm asking you to trust this one, not because I'm a duke or because I can protect you, but because you've seen exactly who I am, the obsession, the coldness, the broken parts, and you chose me anyway." "I did." She cupped his face in her hands. "I do. I always will." "Then let this ring mark a new beginning." His voice was thick with emotion. "Not a contract, a covenant." He kissed her there in the garden, surrounded by flowers and sunshine and the evidence of everything they had built from ashes. When they finally separated, Ilara rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Do you believe in fate now?" she asked. "I believe in you." His arms tightened around her. "I believe that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. I believe that you were meant to find me, or I was meant to find you, and I don't care which one is true as long as we're together." Ilara smiled. "That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said. Don't get used to it. I have a reputation for being cold and unfeeling." "Had," she corrected. Past tense. They stood there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. 2 people who had found each other in the darkest circumstances and built something neither had planned, but both had needed. Ilara had been abandoned once, left in the cold to die, told she was worthless, forgotten. But Lysander had found her. He had chosen her. He had loved her when she had stopped believing love existed. And together, they had proven that even the coldest beginnings could lead to the warmest futures, if you were brave enough to fight for them. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story touched something in you, the fight for justice, the power of being chosen, the strength it takes to survive, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you are listening from. If you're ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even in the coldest moments, love can find a way.